I'm working with the Accra office, as he mentioned, and I would want to talk about our work on mapping Africa's built environment using satellite imagery. This is joint work with offices in Zurich and then recently in Tel Aviv. And these are the people who have contributed to this work. The main focus of this work is to organize information and make it accessible to the general public and useful as well. And we realized there's a huge information gap in the information on certain products, for example, Google Maps. But this is not just for Google Maps, but every other map as well, especially in Africa. You realize there are buildings and roads that are missing. So in this slide, I show you on the left, a town in South Africa, and we see the density and clusters of buildings present there. And in its corresponding image on Google Maps, we realize there's a whole lot of information missing. And after some of our work, this is how much impact we made by predicting this much buildings in such areas. For the information gap, it's not just with buildings, it's also with roads. So our project started initially with detecting buildings, but we realized that the work with roads synergizes with buildings as well. And so we have been working extensively on detecting buildings and roads, hence Africa's built environment. And in this presentation, my focus might mainly be on buildings. So this is important to us because a lot of people are moving into the cities, it's becoming very dense, and UN predicts that by 2050, about over 64% of population will be centered in the cities. In Africa, we have settlements that are slums that are different and still yet in the cities, and these have not been recorded appropriately for for measuring the impact of urbanization on the environment. Talk of climate change. Also, there's again on the information gap, this map shows us how recent these countries had a population census. And in a country, for example, like Democratic Republic of Congo, their last census was of 40 years ago. And they actually have one of the biggest cities in Africa. So we realized how this is going to affect us as Africans in case we want to plan or respond to crisis, take actions for certain policies. And this motivates us to pursue this task. It is not as easy as it sounds. Building detection is challenging, especially in Africa, because these images from Maxa Technologies show us that the buildings indeed are diverse, different sizes, different shapes. And then imagine if there's an image, a satellite imagery 50 centimeters above the ground, and it detects one of these clustered buildings, small roof, its corresponding number of pixels in the imagery captured would be a very small blob, and detecting such instance in an image might be a very difficult task. We see the same issue with roads, where you can't really tell if from an satellite imagery, if this is on the farthest left, if it's a riverbed, the model is likely to predict it as a road, and construction sites and others. And these are all issues we anticipated we might face in this task. So it hasn't been easy, but so far so good. We developed a building detector model, which we modified for roads as well. And we've detected a huge number of buildings and roads in Africa, with focus on Africa for now in this talk. We've added these buildings to roads. We've added these buildings and roads, to Google Maps with new ingestions ongoing, and we launched a data set called Open Buildings Dataset, which I'll talk about. And so let's dive deep into our detection model for buildings. we use the UNet model for our building detection, and it started with an instance segmentation, and with the pixels detected as buildings, we grouped them together using simple connected components to form instances of our buildings. In this image, on the farthest left, you see the imagery fed into our model, and in the middle is the instances of buildings detected from our model. On the far right is the roads that were detected. For the training scheme, we developed a data set which is internal to Google. We had a training set of over 100,000 images and a test set over 2,000 images. And altogether, we had about 1.7 million polygons detected manually labeled for this task. And we trained our model on this to be able to predict several buildings, and the ingestions were made into maps. Let's quickly take a look at the main model that was used for this work. So we had a lot of improvement. The base model UNet, which is popular in literature for satellite segmentation tasks or remote sensing tasks, though others are being used. It was well suited for our tasks when we started, and we had a lot of improvements, such as we used the dice loss, which we later changed to the Tversky focal loss. We did morphological pre and post processing. We did pre-training. We made use of pixel weighting and self-training, and a whole others. For some of them, I would describe in this presentation. This graph shows us the significance of these tweaks and improvements we use on UNet to our final model performance, and more details are shown in the paper we recently brought out. And so the base model again is UNet, but the encoder was ResNet 50. Yes, we did try deeper models, but we realized that the performance wasn't any better whenever we go deeper. So ResNet 50, the version 2, was what we use as our encoder for the UNet. And we modified the decoder to have skip connections like the encoder in order to boost the performance of our model. For the loss, we started off with a dice loss, a linear combination of dice loss and cross entropy loss. The dice loss is just a smooth version of intersection over union. And for our task, it was important for making the predictions crisp. However, we were interested in penalizing, to a certain extent, false positives and false negatives detected by a model, and also control how the hard or easy examples were predicted, and the Tversky focal loss was helpful in this. And so with tunable parameters, we managed to achieve what we desired from our detection model. We also use pixel loss weighting, which is very necessary because a lot of buildings we saw in the first image from the presentation were densely clustered together, and it will make sense if a detector model might come out seeing them as one huge building. And so the pixel loss weighting was helpful and is very crucial when a lot of buildings that are separate actually seem clustered together. The method described in literature wasn't helpful as it made our performance slow. So we updated that using some kernel method, and it improved performance. We also tried mix-up as a regularization technique. We did try the standard augmentation techniques, and with mix-up, where we combine images and their labels during training, and the effect, as we saw in the significance of the different methods we used to improve, was good. It was helpful. We did pre-training. We started with pre-training, and then we explored remote sensing tasks like nighttime luminance and location. It did perform well, but it wasn't significantly better than ImageNet. And so our final model is still working with ImageNet pre-training on the encoder block. The final tweak I would like to talk about is self-training. Remote sensing task has a huge database with unlabeled data, and we leverage this by training over 100 million images with one of our best models first, and then the predicted instances from these unlabeled images were retrained several times to predict better instances of buildings. And we see in the image here, that the student model is more confident over time that a building that it has detected is indeed a building. And this was helpful for our task. So currently, we have ingested over 133 million buildings from Africa into Google Maps, which comprises over 55 countries, and there are more buildings coming. The same with roads. We've detected over 228,000 kilometers of roads. We've added these more ingestions coming from 11 countries in Africa, and we are excited by the effect or impact of this on the African community. Given the information gap I discussed earlier, once we had a huge set of building footprint detected, we were wondering, why not make this openly available for others to be able to use for extensive research and build products that would eventually build to bridge the gap of information that has been created by the absence of the buildings in maps. And so we have launched Open Buildings data sets about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And this data set is housed on the microsites I'm sharing in your slides right now. You can visit and check it out. A brief description about this data set: we use 30 centimeters or 50 centimeter satellite imagery to generate these data sets from our building detector model we built. We have in total about 516 million building detections. This is after deduplication. And the data set has polygons with metadata, confidence scores, thresholds. And the ways you can access them are described in detail on the microsite that houses the data set. The graphs I show you in the slide on the top indicates that we managed to predict a lot of very small buildings, which is good for us because a lot of settlements in Africa do look very small as we started with. And the graph in the lower part also tells us that the confidence scores on the buildings we detected are not uniform across Africa. It is expected buildings, the diversity varies from region and with different types of settlements, rural or urban, and so this is expected. I'll show you some examples of the inference run on our data set. So in this, you see buildings detected from a satellite imagery from our model. The confidence scores, the green ones are the most confident, and followed by yellow and then red. We did some for rural as well, and we see here our model is very confident that all these are buildings. And then for refugee settlements, it wasn't all that good. We had bad detections as well, and the errors were as a result of complex roof structure, from our buildings. We had buildings that seemed to touch each other despite efforts to separate them. Some still came out as merged. We had ambiguous segmentation where the model is not even sure what is detecting in the first place. Tree occlusion also poses an issue for the buildings we detected. And these are but a few of the errors we face. We are very much excited about the use cases of this data set and the ones we've not even anticipated, hoping that it would be beneficial in estimating the population densities in various countries, responding effectively to emergency and crisis, measuring the impacts of human settlement on the environment, and others like vaccination planning. Aside the microsites, we released a paper, Continental Scale Building Detection from High-Res Satellite Imagery, and that described the technicalities of the model that was used the model that was used for this dataset, open building dataset. It also has a keyword block and a Google AI block shared in the slide. In the future, we are hoping to extend this dataset beyond Africa, support people interested in using open buildings, and for research, improve the worst performing regions and exploit the use of multi-band, multi-temporal data in new models. And before I leave, I would like to use this opportunity to call out for anyone interested for such a position, software engineer in Accra. If you are, check it out, the specifications, contact us, and let's see how that goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Abigail, for a fascinating presentation and the clarity of your talk. That was really impressive. We don't have yet questions in the chat, so please don't hesitate to ask questions. I have a few questions in the meantime. So the first question for you is, have you or are you planning maybe to collaborate with local authorities, maybe to get more data or different types of data, or to help them in planning, validate your models maybe?
It is something in the pipeline, but we first have to establish the trust, and this is an issue that such a mission faces. So yes, we are hoping in the end we can collaborate with the local authorities, but we've not started that. We've not started that pursuit yet.
Okay, I see. Thank you. And we have a question from Ines, who is asking, are there particular challenges specific to Africa?
Yes, there's a whole lot. The buildings in Africa are not uniform. They vary from region to region. It will be difficult to detect a building in a desert and other areas. And these issues were faced when we tried to achieve this task. Also, the information that we were using, which is the satellite imagery, has a certain limitation, a certain number of years that is not corresponding to the true settlement on ground as at now. And these are but a few I can think of my head, issues we face here for identifying a built environment. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Another question, this time from Fares, who is asking, do you cooperate with African governments to update their census?
No, not yet, maybe in the future. So maybe I failed to mention the main purpose of this project was to identify the buildings, so map Africa's built environments, specifically buildings. And we realized the project synergizes with roads as well. So the first impact is in our product, which is Google Maps. We are hoping through the release or the launch of this data set that we may be able to reach out to all the necessary groups to make sure the impact of this work is felt as much as possible. So we just started and we are optimistic we'll get there.
Okay, interesting. A question from Christine, who is asking if you're planning on developing models of sacred sites for indigenous communities in Africa.
That's a good question.
Indeed.
If the need arises, we would, because then the mission of mapping up Africa's built environment includes those areas. The technicalities and I don't know what word to use, but you have to go through certain policies and certain groups to be able to put such information out there and to be able to map certain environments. Maybe it comes back to building a relationship with the government and the authorities. So once those are established, I'm sure it will be easy to get this done in these areas as she's asking.
Perfect, thank you. And one last question on my side. Given that you're working at Google and that you have virtually unlimited computational power and access to data, what would be your ideal, your ultimate goal for this project?
The ultimate goal for this project, we want to organize the information from the satellite imagery and make it accessible and useful universally. So for those who can't do what we are doing because of the compute and the resources we have, we would take that burden off them and have the job done, and then they can continue from there. We are actually excited about the use cases that we haven't even anticipated, and people are yet to reach out to us and tell us that we think your data set is useful for this, and so let's consider doing that.